For centuries, her name was a literal blank in the historical record, remembered only in a governor's journal as a nameless woman, a one of Windsor, who paid the ultimate price for a crime that doesn't exist. Welcome to The Thing About Witch Hunts, the podcast where we explore the past, present, and future of witch hunting in search of an end to these tragedies. I'm Josh Hutchinson.
This is Sarah Jack. We are approaching the 379th anniversary of the execution of Alice Young. On May 26, 1647, Alice was led to the gallows in Hartford, Connecticut, becoming the first known person to be executed for witchcraft in England's North American colonies.
Living in Windsor during a devastating influenza epidemic that claimed the lives of many neighborhood children, Alice found herself the target of a community's fear and desperation. While her own daughter, Alice Jr., survived the sickness, Alice did not survive the accusations that followed.
Her story was nearly lost to time until researchers unearthed her name on the inside cover of an old town clerk's diary. Then in May of 2023, after nearly 4 centuries of being labeled a witch, the Connecticut General Assembly passed a historic resolution officially clearing her name and offering an apology to her descendants.
Joining us today to discuss this legacy are 2 women who are ensuring Alice Young is never forgotten again. We welcome back author Beth Caruso, whose meticulous research and Connecticut Witch Trials trilogy, including her novel One of Windsor, helped bring Alice's story out of the shadows. And we are joined by playwright Lauren Cavanaugh, who is currently developing a new theatrical work to bring the humanity and tragedy of the Alice Young trial to life on the stage.
We have a fantastic group around the mics today. First, a warm welcome back to the wonderful author Beth Caruso, award-winning author and a familiar favorite here. And it is always such a joy to have you with us. We're also excited to introduce a brand new guest, Lauren Cavanaugh. Lauren, welcome. We're so happy to have you both.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here again.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited.
Please tell our listeners who you are and about your work.
Well, my name is Beth Caruso. I write novels about the Connecticut witch trials, the first one being One of Windsor, the untold story of America's first witch hanging. It's a trilogy called the Connecticut Witch Trial Trilogy. The second book is called The Salty Rose, which is largely about John Winthrop Jr., his alchemical intrigue and his roles in stopping the witch trials. And then the final one is about Alice Young Jr., who was the only daughter of Alice Young. I've also done research for over 10 years regarding the first witch trial case of Alice Young. And I'm thrilled that Lauren is with me today and she can tell more about herself and how we met, but I'm thrilled she's here.
Hi. I met Beth. It was like an unofficial meeting. I went to one of her witch walks because I've been interested in the paranormal in Connecticut and then also women's stories in Connecticut and been interested in witchy stuff forever. So I figured I'd go to this witch walk and I thought it'd be just a fun thing to do. It turned out to be very eye-opening and changed my perspective on witch trials in general. And of course I know about Salem and everything like that. But I really didn't know anything about the Connecticut witch trials at all. When I got some understanding that there might have been a trial here, I needed to know more. So I went on the witch walk and it really just completely flipped the script for me, no pun intended. And I realized that these were just women who were dealing with this, or some men, but people who were being persecuted for just being in a certain neighborhood or did not get along with people, or we don't even know the answers as to why. But innocent lives were lost. So I felt I needed to do something about it. So it took a long time, actually, a couple of years. And I had this little file on my desk, on my desktop to keep putting things in. And then I had some free time. And then I said, this story has been calling me, so I need to do something about it. So that's why I emailed Beth kind of randomly. And I said, hi, I'm interested in this story. I really want to learn more. I'm a playwright. I've been a playwright, since childhood, but went to school for theater and went to NYU for educational theater and did a few little pieces. So I've always had that way of expressing myself. So I felt I needed to tell this story. And the more I learned about it, the more I realized I connect a lot with this story. So I just felt like it needed to be told. So that's why I emailed her. I was surprised to get a response. We had coffee and we just seemed to click. And she's been a mentor actually for me for about a couple of years now.
Great. Thank you so much. We're so happy that you've taken the interest and written a play about one of the victims that people know about a little, but not a whole lot, Alice Young. She was the first one executed, and it's so great to have her story on the stage. What do we need to know about the project?
Well, right now it's had a couple of readings, mostly through Zoom, and I've had many actors and directors interested in it. I've had interest with producers. I've submitted it to certain play festivals and new works festivals, gotten a little nibbles here and there, but nothing yet. But I'm still hoping. I feel like it's going to have a life of its own. I feel like there's moments where there's like some sort of magical synchronicity where I'm seeing signs where I feel like this piece is supposed to be on stage. It hasn't yet, but I really do feel like it will be very shortly. So that's my hope.
Oh, I'm confident it will be too. And I see Lauren as part of Team Alice. And what do I mean by Team Alice? You two were part of Team Alice. And, Team Alice we're going forward in remembrance, trying to build awareness about this person who was wrongfully executed for a crime that she didn't commit. You guys were on Team Alice when we went forward with the state legislature in 2023 and were able to successfully get the exoneration / absolution for Alice Young. Long story with that. But anyway, art and different forms of art are ways to bring this story to life. For me, it was through novels, but being so connected to Alice. And I think that's because of also living in Windsor, walking the same paths and the same areas that she would have. I've always felt very connected to her. So for me, it was truly a spiritual endeavor to bring awareness to her story. So when I see other people come, they really want to know the history. They really want to tell this history in their own way with their unique talents. Then to me, they are part of Team Alice. And I've read this play, and Lauren is extremely talented. In my heart of hearts, I do believe this needs to come to fruition, and it will when the time is right and the right people are there to pick it up and run with it. Because, it started out when I wrote those novels. When I wrote the first one about Alice Young, one of Windsor, half of Windsor didn't even know about Alice. Mm-hmm. And I thought, that is such a tragedy that this woman who so unceremoniously died for something she didn't even do, such an injustice, wasn't even known. And the very first witch trial victim in the American colonies, it just blew my mind that nobody knew. And so it was important to get her name out there. And of course, then the other witch trial victim stories in Connecticut followed. She certainly wasn't the only one. So to see it go from that level of knowledge and maybe one person raising their hand saying they knew about the Connecticut witch trials in a packed room for a lecture, to going from the novel getting out there, doing the exoneration. We had coverage from Canada, from Britain, from Australia, from all over the world, but still there's a lot of people, even in Connecticut, who don't know. And I am just so absolutely thrilled that Lauren has done this, and she's done it in such a beautiful way with this play. It's very well written, and it is a beautiful piece. And I can't wait for her to talk more about it right now.
No, that's so sweet. Thank you. I love playwriting. It's my home. So, to get a story that is very meaningful, connects to me, it connects to a lot of women, and have that there every day kind of reminding me, I need to do this, I need to do this, I need to do this. I knew it was important. And I knew that we could connect it to current events and things happening now. The play itself is called Windsor's Daughter. So it's a little bit of a take on Beth's book, but it's different, but it's got lots of similarities between the two. But it's called Windsor's Daughter. So it's focusing on Alice's daughter, Alice as well, but because it's confusing for an audience, and Beth did the same thing for her book, we changed her name to Alyssa because it just makes it easier to follow. So Alyssa starts the play off. We do a scene for Alyssa and her future husband, Simon. And then we do like a few flashback sequences to go back into the life of Alice. And then we go to Alice's death and the relationship between a good friend who Beth told me about, a woman that was kind of close to her. So I built that character up and I named her Rhodey, and a relationship, good friendship between Rhodey and Alice and how that's affected Rhodey. And then it kind of circles back to a more current time for Alyssa, and it follows Alyssa's path. And then we actually do end with John Winthrop kind of closing the door on everything. And John Winthrop is kind of bookending both parts of it too. So he's there. He kind of does this, I think, in the head as like the prince in Romeo and Juliet, who comes in the beginning and then comes in the end and kind of helps to problem solve at the end. But he's very, very critical to this play. And I feel like there's been moments where he's like popped up in the magical realism thing. He happened to be on a certain street that I was on, and I was promoting the play, and the name was his name on the street. And it was just very bizarre, like how sometimes I feel like these people, these real people, are telling me, do this, like finish this. This is important. And in the reading itself, the actors were very moved. They said to me after that they were very moved by the piece, and they've been trying to help me find a place for it. And a good friend of mine who played Rhodey said, those words were very memorable. And I've read it separate, like I took the time away from it and came back to it and read it like as if it's not me who wrote it. And sometimes I don't even realize it was me that wrote it. And I'm surprised at the words coming off the page. It's almost like they're lifting off the page without me even doing anything for it. I feel like there's some sort of mystical connection there,
Absolutely. I felt that at times too. I can't tell you how often I see the number 47, 1647. I see 47 everywhere. And maybe it's just me being more aware of it, but the same like with the Winthrop Street. And I think it just shows truly a heartfelt connection that extends from this particular timeline in our reality, stretching to meet them where they are, to be able to pull what's needed to tell their story and to tell it in a way where it's pertinent to what's going on during our times.
Can we go and put ourselves physically where they were and learn and share the story? I suppose that's what your witch walks are about.
Right, yes, because we go to some of the same exact spots in Windsor, right at the town center. And the buildings have changed. There's nothing that you would look at and think, oh, yeah, this is what Alice would have seen in 1647, except for some natural features like the Farmington River, which they would have called the Little River, and the Connecticut River, they would have called the Big River. So, and there's some old farm fields, believe it or not, that are still in Windsor today that are growing tobacco. Tobacco was introduced into Windsor back in 1640, so 7 years before Alice Young's case. So you can find little glimpses of it. And there's a couple really old 1600s buildings from that era. But a lot of it is just, like walking through the graveyard, seeing the names from that era, and just knowing, hey, this person was alive when Alice Young was hanged. I know one thing we do on the witch tour is we go to the gravesite of someone who actually lived on Baccarat, the street where Alice Young lived, who knew without a doubt what happened to Alice Young. And so just to touch her gravestone as you look beyond, I think you can see the river from that point. It's just little glimpses, little shadows that I think bring you into that heart space of remembrance. But there's nothing really precise. That's why I think artistic works, whether they're novels or plays, really bring things to life for people. If it's easy for us to imagine, it's how, it's our makeup, but for other people, it's much harder to be taken back and to remember. And, for me, that's why it was so important to do the novel of One of Windsor first. I also do a lot of historical research and knew I was going to do an academic article. It ended up happening with Dr. Catherine Hermes, but that took longer. And it was just so important in order for people to relate to this, to see a real person, not just a dry historical document or historical theory, to bring color to her skin, to bring her love of life into full view. All those kind of things that you see with a fully dimensional person, I think, is an incredible role for art. Like I said, whether it's novels, plays, artwork, whatever it is, it's so important.
Can I just add on to that a little bit? I feel like when I went on your walk, it was very real for me. And 2 points was when it really just hit home. When we were allowed to go to the dock, you mentioned that those who were accused would have been taken on a boat down the river to Hartford. I could not fathom that. Being chained or walked onto a boat to be prosecuted and never see your family again just took me away. And that actually is the end of my second act, which is the big climax is around that point. So that really brought it home and made it real for me. But also when I believe you don't even remember this, but I remember it because it hit me really hard. I might have asked, so where do you find her grave? And I think you said something to the point of well, there is no grave because they were just buried anonymously or not buried or disposed of somewhere, or if the families had enough money, they were able to find burial. I couldn't believe that there is no place for us to honor these people or to memorialize these people who've lost their lives unnecessarily. And that was a light bulb moment for me. And they are very real for me. She is very real to me. She's a mom. She had a daughter about 12, 13, around that time. You can imagine what she would have been like. So to me, she's a very real person.
Yeah. And for me also, being so involved, I felt like I was living half my life writing that book. And I felt like I was in the 1600s, half of my waking hours, because I was thinking about it so much. And she and others who I know were connected to her at the time really touched my heart a lot. Just brought me to tears, to a point where, like Lauren was saying, the words just flying onto the page. It was very similar. We do become extremely connected. And thank you so much for bringing up those two memories from the walk. When you do something, you don't know the impact it has on others unless they tell you, because there was so much we talked about on that walk. So I really appreciate you bringing that up.
I did go to the ancient burial ground. There are some sites of people who are mentioned in your historical research, but not for any of the victims. So there really is no place for us to go and honor them.
Well, and like this witch trial podcast, this is a form of modern memorial. The Facebook pages, when we tell their stories, that's a modern memorial. The novel, in a way, is a modern memorial. This play is a memorial. We do what we can with what we have at a certain point in time. And hopefully the awareness, as it spreads, we may actually have a memorial for these witch trial victims. I certainly hope so one day. They deserve it. And they have thousands of descendants who would love to see that happen as well.
Yep. When you mention Alice Jr., I think about the children she had. It was, it's very significant going from being an only child, likely, to having a full home, all these siblings, and then they've gone on to have so many descendants.
Lauren, as the writer, how did you approach bringing the characters to life, adding that dimensionality that's missing if you just look at a record?
We were talking about this morning, Beth and I. I did about a year's worth of research. I went to the library. I talked to Beth. I read books. I printed out a lot of historical documents, and I highlighted a lot of text and listened to audio of what people might have sound like at the time. I went to Plymouth and I went to the village and listened to people who were historical reenactors and how they spoke. And I know the Crucible, of course, very well, and watched the Crucible again. And I didn't take too much from them because I want my piece to be different. The main thing that I did want to point to is the speech is different. It's somewhere in between Shakespearean and modern. So I had to really focus on how do we bring this to life and make him understandable for a regular audience, but also heightened enough that it makes it seem like it's some other time. It took me a while. So that was the first thing that I focused on. And then I focused on accuracy, and even in dress, and accuracy in what they had for their garden and what herbs they might have worked with, and what the protocol for being Puritan was. And I really worked really hard on finding the history. And then I had to add the element of making them people and pulling from people I know who are parents. And I really thought about certain friends that are parents and how they interact with their children now and base them off of those people that I know and just really try to make them as human as possible that way, while also keeping the heightened text.
When it came to some of the very difficult moments of her story, like the execution, what do you do for the audience? They're watching this, but you have, you want to be appropriate to Alice's memory. You don't want to punish the attendees for observing something horrible. How do you approach that?
I'm a huge fan and studied historical theater for a very long time. So I pulled directly from ancient Greek theater. So the scene where we know that she's going to die, I did it in a way that it is like the Greeks would have done. So they never showed actual violence on stage. What they would do is they would show the before, almost immediate before, and the right after. And the audience is supposed to bridge that gap. But what I did do was make audio cues, like the sound of a rope snapping. I put in drums that represent someone passing. I put in spot cues that would just emphasize different things. You do not see her die immediately. You do see her body after. So it is like a before and after. And then there's a monologue that seems to be the one that brings tears to a lot of people's eyes, which I did not. Well, I kind of knew it because it brought tears to my eyes as I was even writing it. Because as I feel like it was brought from me, not like I did it. It was like it came from me, like it came through me and out, this monologue. And it's from the best friend, Rhodey. And it talks about, what have you done to her? What have you done? And that is also pulling from ancient Greek choruses where they yell at the gods, what is going on? Why did you do this? And I remember being in the Trojan Women in college, and there's a horrible scene where a victim is displayed, but you never see the actual death. You just see the after. So that's what I wanted to do. It will be sad, but it won't be actual violence.
Did you envision any type of special lighting during that time as well?
Yes, and thank you for that question, because I think that the two most important characters in that particular scene, which is the end of Act 2, is Rhodey and her best friend, Alice. And so I put Alice, unfortunately, she's deceased, and we put her in the wheelbarrow. They don't consider them human, so they just put them as a way to discard it. Those who are witches, they discarded them. So I really leaned into that and had her in a wheelbarrow, deceased. And so there's a spotlight on that. And then there's a spotlight on Rhodey downstage, who is expressing her grief to the audience, but also to anyone on that street who would hear her. And the lights fade on the body of Alice, and then you see her, the spirit of Alice, standing there, and then Alice disappears, and then Rhodey is really abused by those who did the execution at the end. It's very sad and very high drama, but I felt it needed to go that way in order for really to drive it home. These are people. They're human beings. They should never had this happen to them.
What do you hope that your audience takes away, or what do you hope that they're thinking about from this play?
I feel like there's an immediate connection to what's happening in our current environment, and not to touch too much on it, but I see discrimination and persecution every day in the media, and anybody who might be a little bit different still gets persecuted. If you are LGBTQ, if you're trans, or if you're anything different, also if you're not a naturalized citizen or anything like that. I feel like that's happening more and more, where there's persecution and unnecessary harm done. And I feel that's an immediate connection to what has happened 300, almost 400 years ago. It's almost the same storyline, but different people, So I feel like it really needs to be expressed and it's expressed in metaphor. It's not out there, like it's expressed in a way that is very obvious. But if you can make those connections, which I hope it will be made, you can see how that correlates with today.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many parallels. Talk about, not knowing where these witch trial victims are buried. We've had people literally disappeared out of our country with their families not knowing where they are for weeks or months at a time, if ever. Some have died, and nobody knows exactly what became of them. There are strong parallels to present day. Ultimately, I hope I hope my work, and Lauren can speak for herself as far as her work, but I definitely feel like we need to be kinder to each other. We need to care for each other more in community. We need to be more tolerant of each other, more accepting of each other. And these are, to me, the strongest themes in these works.
Yeah, definitely care for your community, look after each other. Don't be so quick to judge someone who may be different from you. Those are important things to remember. And I think ultimately that's a spiritual take too. I'm not claiming any sort of religion, but I feel like we should be taking care of each other. And I always lead, or tried my best to lead with kindness and teach that. And I hope to teach that also through my writing as well.
We know in 1647, the community was in a health crisis. They were losing family members to sickness. They were afraid and they were blaming. So those are definitely experiences this generation now has gone through that, of course, likely led to Alice having a target on her back. Do you want to talk about that history at all?
I'm going to defer to Beth. She's better at history than I am.
Well, during those times, science was at the very beginning, all right, that they didn't quite understand the scientific basis behind disease in the same way that we know now. However, in present day, it doesn't stop conspiracy theory from getting in the way of science. So you have parallels there. And it seems like when something very, very difficult happens, whether you lose a baby in childbirth or you lose children during a sickness or some other terrible tragedy that is part of being human, which is horrible. You want an explanation for things that happen, especially things that are so hard to digest or incorporate into your life. You want an explanation. And I think for these deaths and illnesses to happen in the setting of a wilderness where the English settlers who were there didn't truly understand the native people who lived in this setting. They were just learning about the animals, the plants. Also, a lot of them, we often take it for granted that they were farmers and they came over here and they knew what to do. A lot of them had changed trades. They weren't natural farmers. They were coming over and they were learning this trade for the very first time. And so, when you do something new, especially in a whole new setting, there's going to be trial and error and there are failures. So sometimes crops failed. Sometimes there were, wolves in the wilderness that got some of their animals and they were on the edge of life and death. Their crops weren't established, their fruit orchards weren't established. And now all of a sudden there are people dying. Impose upon all that a religious establishment, which is a theocracy. It's at the center of everything. It influences government in a major way. It's at the center of their lives. And on the pulpits every Sunday, ministers are feeding paranoia. Be wary of the devil coming to people in your community. The devil is trying to wreak havoc on these great settlements that we are doing in the name of God. And so you're hearing this every single Sunday, and more than that. And people are encouraged to watch each other, like in a modern day fascist state, and report on each other. So you combine all this together, and anybody who doesn't fit into a certain box could be looked at sideways. But let's say you knew you didn't quite fit into that box and something was coming along. Well, maybe you pointed the finger to take the focus off of you. A lot of times that happened. It wasn't just those who were like high and mighty and steeped in the Puritan doctrine. It could be others who were fearful for themselves, who wanted to take the attention off themselves too. So as far as who wanted Alice to be to blame or any other witch trial victim to be to blame, of course, it depended on the circumstances for many, many people. If there were mistakes on the part of the local government or of the churches at the time, they're going to want to deflect onto someone else. There was a lot of misogyny at the time. Men didn't want to take blame for these things. And of course, we understand now there really is no blame in a lot of these circumstances. This is part of the human experience. Sometimes babies die. Sometimes a child dies. Sometimes tragedies happen. There are natural things that occur, earthquakes, storms, lightning strikes. I mean, we can name a whole bunch of these things. And they just happen. There's not malevolence behind it. But in a world so imbued with specters and paranoia of the devil and his works, you can see how this would all be shifted into blaming someone. And who would they blame? People who were close to the tragedy in some way, or people who they didn't necessarily like, people who were overtly outside the box of what was expected for right behavior at the time. So many factors are infused into these incidents. And, you can't really say this is a black and white situation, what happened in a specific witch trial incidents. There are just so many factors and so many human complications and fears and fallen dreams, so many things that are at play.
And also, I just feel like there was, as you said, this paranoia about things, but also blaming, to say it, the Native people for things that had nothing to do with them at all. The illness had nothing to do with the Native people, but they were considered the devil and don't go out in too far, and those people are not really human. And the amount of horrible things I read in historical texts about Native people, it's just, I couldn't bear it. It's just blaming the other. And that was also happening with women and blaming the other, especially if a woman was older and single or had one child or had a female child and lost their status in the community. There's several cases of that in Connecticut where women were discriminated against because they lost their social status because their husband died or something like that. And I just want to highlight that because those cases are just examples of then, but they can still occur again, and do still occur in different forms. And that paranoia is still there. That fear of the other is still there,
Thank you for bringing that up. That is absolutely crucial.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what is the lesson here? How can we stop blaming people in this witch trial sort of fashion?
Mm-hmm.
Who is the other? Maybe we need to, as we were talking about before with community, know your neighbors, know who they are, have exchanges with each other, talk, get to know each other, ask questions, see who someone really is, and focus on how are we alike?
Similarities.
How are we both human?
Right. We need to stop this. It's just rampant dehumanization.
Yeah.
Just all over the place, calling people devils, literally demons, saying they're doing the work of the devil, anything like that.
Yeah.
We need to stop that right away. People, that's awful.
Yeah.
To do. Yeah.
I mean, I think that's also what, not to say it too much because my play is different, but to point to the crucible is what that was trying to get at as well. I mean, that happened during the McCarthy era, and that was what he was trying to pinpoint to. And so I feel like we're in another cycle of that, and I feel like that's why I had to write what I had to write.
And you did a great job of it.
Oh, thank you. Well, I'm just hoping somebody out there is interested in it, and we hope to do some readings, Beth and I, coming up at some point when we both have free time.
Yeah. Well, one of the reasons we met today is because the anniversary of Alice's hanging is approaching. What would change if Alice becomes a household name, if people realize who she is and what her story was? And all your work, Beth and Lauren, what you're working on, and of course, our podcast, when we've had the opportunity to feature her history, it's working towards that. But wouldn't that be amazing?
That would be amazing. I feel like she would be happy to be finally recognized. I think I'm not only focusing on her, I'm also focusing on Lydia.
Yeah.
It needs to be known that this happened and we shouldn't brush anything under the rug and just accept the history as it is. But also, as we've been talking about, like, how does it correlate with what's happening now? And I think that would help. And I think that she would be proud if we were able to utilize it in a way that helps others.
By doing this, I think we're both coming from the perspective of raising awareness through the arts, through entertainment to a certain degree, as opposed to your question is, what will happen if she's more known? And part of me is like, well, great, it'll raise awareness. But the other part of me is like, okay, I'm going to have to brace myself because I've seen what's happened in Salem as far as the commercialization and just trying to make a book off this history without necessarily conveying it in an authentic way. So I think that if you don't try and convey it in an authentic way, I think it's harmful to people who were harmed in life than they're harmed in death because their stories aren't truly represented. It can become offensive to the descendants as well. So going forward, yes, I want people to know more about Alice. I want them to know about the other witch trial victims, but I want it done with integrity and authenticity.
Right. We
And
both believe in that. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but yeah, we believe in authenticity. And I think we were talking about that before, where it's like we want it to be about the awareness and it be something that people are able to watch and learn from it. But we don't want to make it using the dramatic event as entertainment, right? So it will be dramatic and there will be some high drama, but we're doing that to get people to wake up and realize that this was an important event and we need to honor and memorialize as well.
entertainment isn't necessarily bad if it's done in a way that is authentic and is respectful. So, yeah, I think there are many opportunities for that to happen. And I saw this in your play as well, Lauren, but I know when I wrote One of Windsor, it was really important to me that it wasn't all doom and gloom. I wanted to show the beauty of Alice's life, her discovery of this new wilderness and fascination with it, the darkness, just as a human being who's very sensitive to these things, I needed to see balance in that novel, that it wasn't all just dark and, oh, people are mean and that's it. No, that's not what I wanted to present. And so, there have to be some lighter things there too to humanize it because, unless we're in a constant 24/7 dark depression, human life is not like that, even in the most tragic of circumstances, right? So the presenting this story in balance, in remembering all those things that humans are a whole array of things, not just the dark things that may happen to them or the hardest parts of their life, is really important in presentation too. And I think that helps people not to be so afraid to look at these stories and to be able to relate to themselves, even to a point in these stories. You know, how often have I felt misunderstood in a group dynamic? How often have I been blamed for something I didn't actually do because people weren't looking at me in a judicious, non judgmental way? And I'm not just, when I say I'm not just referring to me. I'm just saying, as a human, as any human looking at these stories, how could one relate to that on a personal level,
To focus in on like the mother-daughter and relationship will help with that lightness because there is a little bit of levity between the two of them and they love each other. We really try to play into that, a 12-year-old girl and her mom and just kind of, and I saw that in your book too, where they're singing and dancing and having fun. And I do want to keep that in my play as well.
Yeah. Even in the darkest times, we can find some sweetness there. And usually where we find it is in how we treat each other, the care that can give each other in certain dark moments, the nature around us, whatever is around us that can nurture us. So these are important things to remember too in trying times.
Yeah, it's important. Part of humanizing these people and fleshing them out is not just to record the history, but encapsulating that human experience that people can connect with. It just leaves you, it's something that sticks with you more than just a fact on a piece of paper.
Absolutely.
So it's very important to do a play like this. So thank you so much.
Well, I really thank you for helping me get the word out and helping Alice's story get out there. And I know you've been doing it for a lot longer, and please keep it her voice and the voice of those being heard. I just wanted to say that we are thinking of doing readings. There might be a combined Windsor's Daughter witch walk sometime soon. We just thought of this, so we don't know for sure. And I have a brand new site to look. You can look at a little bit about me. I just built it as of yesterday on culturalist.com. My handle is Cavanaugh, last name CAVANAUGH and it's on culturist.com. That one is all about the arts that I've been working on. So I hope to build up from there. It's kind of restarting because I was I was from Connecticut, then to New York, and then back. So I have to kind of build everything back up again.
Thank you for joining us for this special anniversary episode. If you are interested in exploring the local history firsthand, I invite you to look up Beth Caruso's Witch Walks on her One of Windsor Facebook page. If you would like to visit Alice's memorial brick, it is at Windsor Town Center.
We also encourage you, wherever you are in the world, to pay your own tribute to Alice Young, whether it's by lighting a candle, sharing a social media post, or laying a flower to honor her memory on May 26th.
You can also visit the memorial wall on the Connecticut Witch Trial Exoneration Project website, connecticutwitchtrials.org, to post a tribute.
Our podcast has many excellent episodes on Connecticut's witch trial history, but if you are just joining us, you can begin with our very first episode, which featured the Connecticut witch trials.
And have a great today and a beautiful tomorrow.